Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. I'm Cipher, and this is the Devil's Advocate Debate Club. Welcome back. Today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about genetic engineering and its future for uteruses in vitro, especially for humans. Genetic engineering has taken amazing steps in the past couple of decades, especially since we've started using CRISPR, a new machine to much more cheaply and easily achieve drastic results within drastic changes within the genome of whatever we're working with. Because of this, we're getting to the point where we can start making changes to our babies before they're born, choosing their gender, their eye and hair color potentially, maybe even their height. And as we learn more and more about this, well, a lot more about them, potentially aspects of their personality. This might even be a way to prevent a certain number of violent crimes by ferreting out those genes when children are still in the womb. But of course, anytime that you start quote-unquote playing God, people are going to be worried about the consequences, and rightfully so, in the sense that there are plenty of potential consequences to worry about, especially social ones. So, when it comes to picking your kids' eye and hair color and height, most of the people arguing against it are just saying that we should let people be who they would naturally be, either because nature or God made them that way. And I see that argument, I think, most from the religious community. However, there are certainly people who are worried about their identities being erased. For instance, there are lots of cool things that could be done with genetic engineering, expanding the human physical capabilities beyond what they currently are. We recently learned how to regrow hair follicles on the ears, the hearing follicles. So basically regrow your ear hairs, which is the first step towards preventing and potentially curing deafness. We could, with that knowledge and with our ability to change genes in utero, potentially expand upon the human hearing range just with what we already know, even before taking further steps to expand our physical capabilities. But before doing any of that, the first thing that they're looking at is fixing problems like autism and birth defects in the womb. Because, well, these are, for the most part, a negative to society. However, there are people, of course, crying that this is ableist, that you should let people be who they are, and as a society we should work around their disabilities to give them an equal chance with everyone else. Now, clearly it seems like it would be probably the cheaper and easier solution, if possible, to solve these problems in utero. So for most people, this isn't too much of an argument when it comes to most disabilities. But there are certainly forms of autism that are more personality quirks than disabilities. Sure, they make you different, and you might not fit into society as evenly as you would otherwise, but there are plenty of autistic people who lead normal, happy, and successful lives, and who have full control on any, emotional quirks that they might have. So there certainly becomes a question of, do we stop, and where? Because I can certainly see the argument that, okay, eliminating birth defects is just fine, but what about door height, doorways? See, I am roughly 6'5", and I've visited Japan. One of the things that I found there is that in the majority of homes built during a certain time frame, I don't remember exactly when, the average door height was, I was about 6'2" at the time, and the door height was 6'1", I believe, something like that. But the average door height was about an inch shorter than I was, so I would think I could make it through and bang my head on many doors, because most doors I could fit through, but the ones that I couldn't were just tall enough that it looked like I could. Now, to prevent this problem, if we wanted a, say, perfectly efficient society, or if not perfectly efficient as we could manage, we could make everyone roughly the same height and, roughly the same body type, and then build everything based around that height and body type so that it would be theoretically convenient for everyone. Left-handed people, for instance, have a slightly lower life expectancy than right-handed people, basically because power tools and lots of other things are made for right-handed people, because we are the vast majority, and so left-handed people are more likely to get injured using things that just aren't made for them. Now, more and more things these days are made to be ambidextrous or for either hand, but still, if we could make everyone right-handed and have that, just, I guess, normalization, it would create a higher level of efficiency. That being said, it can definitely be argued, and I certainly believe, that diversity is our strength, and I don't mean that racially. I mean that too, but in this case what I'm talking about is height, speed, weight. Working as a traveling carny, I have to say, there are certainly times when nobody else could do the things that I do because I'm about 4 or 5 inches taller than the next person down, and so there are just things that I can reach that other people can't. But at the same time, 2 people my size couldn't both work in, say, the water race game together easily when we need to work on things in there. But me and one of my smaller coworkers, who's about half my height and smaller in frame, have no problem slipping past each other and working as a team in the game. That being said, if it were 2 people their size in the game, well, they wouldn't be able to reach half the things that we needed to do. And so our diversity of size in this case, as well as our diversity of strength in other ways, makes us a good team. This is something that would be entirely eliminated if we started genetically making everyone the same to simplify our manufacturing process and to make things more efficient. That being said, there are certainly arguments for both sides on this, and it would be interesting to see a experiment with maybe a section of society, a city or a small state where everyone was the same size and everything was built to efficiently work with them in that manner. But again, there's going to be lots of moral and philosophical arguments against this. So let's get into the subject of trans people. Trans people are if not growing percentage of our society, then are growing invisibility in our society. And while a lot of people wouldn't think about this as being a genetic thing, we've certainly found genetic markers that are much, much more common in gay people than straight people, and, ways to start genetically being able to tell all sorts of things about people. Also, there's a small percentage of the population, comparable essentially to the number of people who are born albino each year, who are born with a disgendered brain. This means that they're born either in a male body with a female brain or a female body with a male brain. in some cases, their hormone levels are also more in touch with their brain's gender than their bodies, but this is not always the case. While it is incredibly rare, this would actually account for a very high percentage of the trans community if we tested everyone for disgendered brains. It's something that's been studied, but is certainly not included just when you get a CAT scan, at least not to my knowledge. Actually, they might be able to tell that from an MRI, probably not a CAT scan. I'll have to look into that more. Anyway, though, when we find these people with disgendered brains, regardless of how much of the trans community they make up, if we could tell in utero that this was the case, what should we do? Should we match their brain to their body? Should we match their body to their brain if we are, at this point, as geneticists and, a people capable of doing either? And if we do, what if, after they're born, they hate the gender that they were essentially assigned by their parents and doctors, in a way, even though the other option is to allow them to be born disgendered. And I know a lot of the people who very actively support the trans community are saying that we should be letting children at any age, even as young as 4 years old in some cases, choose to transition because they know better than we do, and the earlier that they transition, the less hurtful it is. Well, wouldn't this mean that if we can transition them before they're born, that this would be the best case? That being said, if we do so and they're born in, without a disgendered brain, if they're not born trans, this would mean that they're born cis, or if the disgendered brains account for most or all of the trans community and we started quote-unquote fixing all of these quote-unquote defects in utero, this would, in a sense, eliminate the trans community by making them all cis or quote-unquote normal. However, the trans community has suicide rates of near 50%. Attempt rates of over 50% and success rates of near 50%. A humongous number of trans people kill themselves every year. Percentages that are only rivaled by schizophrenics for the most part, as far as I've found in any research. And there have been studies done to try and tie this to bullying, which have, from what I've seen, found that that's likely not the case. So until other studies are done, we're not sure what causes this dramatic spike, other than that we see it in the trans community. It would be, in that case, irresponsible of us to not treat a person with a disgendered brain in the uterus as seriously as we would with any other potentially lethal birth defect, especially since the lethality percentages here are quite high. So, do we gender the brain to the body or the body to the brain if we're going to medically eliminate the trans community, and is doing so in an attempt to save these now cis people's lives morally the right or wrong choice? I don't know, myself personally, but it's certainly a question that we're probably soon going to be faced with in the medical field and should start thinking about now. This brings me, of course, to a subject more often discussed than eliminating trans people in utero, eliminating gay people. Because as soon as they found quote-unquote gay genes or markers that signified someone was likely to be gay, this is something which was talked about, because we've already been hitting the technological level to be able to make these changes for a while now. And, there were people saying that, because gay people face some issues socially and even potentially medically, that straight people don't, that it would be in their benefit in utero before they would theoretically face any negative psychological repercussions from the act to turn them straight. There are gay people, though, who are, part of the pride community, who feel that this is an attack on their community and an attempt to eliminate them. And I can kind of see where they're coming from. But then, is your sexuality really something to have pride in? Mine's changed throughout the years, and I wouldn't necessarily know what word to use to quantify it now, but it's just been a part of me. It's certainly never something that I've wanted to take any pride in. Not when I was straight, and not now that I'm, by some technical definitions, queer. And by queer, I don't mean gay. I just mean that my sexual preferences lie outside of the norm, which is what queer used to mean before it was co-opted. I want to take it back. Anyway, though, I don't know what's right or wrong when it comes to adjusting people genetically in utero. I don't know if it's a good idea to make everyone the same basic body type for the sake of efficiency. With the trans question, lean towards the idea of matching their bodies to their brain in utero, thus gendering them to their brain, essentially. But if they grow up and are unhappy with their gender at that point, do they deserve any sort of reparations for what's been done? And if so, well then why wouldn't any of these babies, if they grew up to happen to be just entitled, vile people, because any demographic can grow up to be an entitled and vile person, just claim that they were unhappy with their gender for the sake of these reparations? It's a complex issue with, in my opinion, no simple answer. And that's why I hope we can talk more about it in the comments below. So, let me know what you think. Should we be adjusting eye color, hair color, height? Should we be standardizing people for the sake of efficiency? Should we be curing diseases in the womb at all, be they birth defects, autism, transgenderism, or homosexuality, which are not diseases but are things that we might be able to change and which may or may not have positive social impacts on the people if we did, especially when it comes to transgenderism, looking at the suicide rates. I don't know. Anyway, it's a subject I'll probably talk more about. It's certainly one that I give lots of thought to, and I wasn't sure whether or not I was going to do a video on it because I don't have any definitive answers for you here, but maybe that's the best kind of question. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, but more importantly, leave a comment down below. As always, thanks for, wow, I just said that. Well, anyway, I'm your host, Cipher. This has been another episode of the Devil's Advocate Debate Club.